the Cullens are hunting Nazis during World War II.
Hi everyone, I'm Dion.
And I'm Will.
We read books so you don't have to and then get baked and talk about it. Today's video is about Midnight Sun. I did want to start off with some short backstory about Twilight in general. Twilight came out in 2005, and since then we've had a 4-book saga, 5 movies grossing over $3.3 billion, all the merch you could possibly think of, and now we have Midnight Sun. In 2008, Stephenie Meyer had already started writing Midnight Sun, but someone on her team leaked the unfinished version. So if you were a Twihard like me, you've probably already read some of Midnight Sun, but now we have the whole thing and everyone's super excited for it. Even though it's been more than a month since the book came out, so let's just act like it's not. In an interview, Stephenie Meyer said she has 2 more books about the Twilight world that she wants to write, but they won't be coming out anytime soon, and they won't be from Edward's perspective either. In that same interview, she said that writing from Edward's perspective was giving her anxiety, and to be totally honest, his perspective was giving me anxiety too. Before we get started, I did want to address some criticisms in regards to Twilight and the real-life Quileute tribe. There's been billions of dollars of profit from their inclusion in Twilight without their permission, and they haven't received any type of payment or contribution or anything. Their culture has been appropriated just for the sake of Twilight merch. There even used to be like busloads of fans coming onto their 1 square mile of reservation every day for Twilight tours. MSN did a Twilight virtual tour just so they could hop on that Twilight gravy train, but they only asked the Forks Chamber of Commerce and they didn't ask the Quileutes themselves. They trespassed onto a sacred Quileute cemetery and they put spooky music over their video edits. The whole thing was just really disrespectful. So imagine that you live in a tribe where you respect your elders and your ancestors, and then someone comes in and is trivializing them with this like dumb video. The caucasity. Luckily, the tribe was able to get MSN to take the video down, but this isn't always the case. Native Americans don't actually have any legal laws to protect them from intellectual property theft, so this is completely legal to do to the Quileutes or any other Native American culture. It would only be fair if the Quileutes could profit off of their own culture instead of these industries looking for a cash grab. The Quileute people are still struggling to this day, even though Twilight has been out for the past, since 2005? What? Twilight has been really popular for at least the past 10 years. In July of this year, they were finally able to start construction for their new school that's going to help everyone move to higher ground. They're in danger of being wiped out by a giant tsunami that could come at any time, so they're trying to move to higher ground so their people aren't wiped out. Because we learned this information, me and Will decided to donate what we paid for Midnight Sun as contribution towards the Quileutes, and we really encourage you to do the same. The link is down in the description below. Please go donate to the Quileute tribe. So here is a quick rundown of Twilight just in case you haven't read the book or watched the movie recently. Bella is the new girl from Phoenix, Arizona, moving to the small town of Forks, so that means everyone and their mom is interested in her. Edward first meets Bella in their biology class and he looks really repulsed by her and she's confused, and then he leaves school for like a week. Then he comes back and tries to play it cool like that didn't just happen, and then Bella's like, that's weird, but he's hot, I guess. Anyways, Bella almost dies from a car skidding on ice in front of the school. Edward zips across the parking lot to save her, and no one noticed except for her. After Dr. Cullen has deemed Bella okay, she wants the truth from Edward, but he starts acting like a jerk just to scare her off so she stops asking questions. Bella starts doing research about Edward just to see what's his problem. She ends up talking to her old friend Jacob Black, and he tells her that the Cullens aren't allowed on the reservation and that they're like the cold ones. And after that, she starts to consider that Edward could be a vampire. Like, who would have thought? One day she goes to Port Angeles with her girlfriends, but she splits up from them so she can find the bookstore. She ends up getting targeted by a gang of, but Edward swoops in and pulls up in his Volvo. He growls at the guys, and then they pull off like skirt skirt. Afterward, Edward takes Bella to dinner, and he reveals to her that he can read everyone's mind except for hers, and later that night he basically admits that he's a vampire. Bella's still down for Edward, like who can resist that velvet smooth voice, that perfect marble skin. They go on a date in a meadow, and basically they just fall in love. Then after the meadow, they get to Bella's house, and Edward is like,
well, actually, Bella, I've been coming into your room like every night to watch you sleep, and like I sniff you while you're sleeping, and I listen to what you're saying while you're sleeping, so.
And then Bella is like,
oh my god, that's so embarrassing.
And then the next day, they go to Edward's house and they meet all of his family. Pretty much all the Cullens like her except for Rosalie. Like, Rosalie has the biggest issue with Bella, but we'll get to that later. Then they go off and they all play some badass vampire baseball. Everyone's having fun when all of a sudden 3 new vampires get into the mix. They're all polite at first, but then James gets one whiff of Bella and he's like, tasty. And now Bella has to leave Forks immediately. But she needs a cover story to tell her dad, Charlie Swan, Forks, Washington, chief of police. She busts into the house, makes a scene, and she tells him that she hates it in Forks, so she has to run away right now. Then she goes with Jasper and Alice, and they go to Phoenix, Arizona. While waiting for the next part of their plan, James is able to kill Bella. No?
The end.
Imagine that it ended right there. Like, it was like the end. Oh my god.
He got her and killed her.
While waiting for the next part of their plan, James is able to call Bella and tell her that he has her mom and that he'll kill her if Bella doesn't meet him at her old ballet studio. Bella is able to trick Alice and Jasper, and she leaves them at the airport without them knowing, and then she goes to the ballet studio, but it was just a trap. He doesn't actually have her mom. So Bella's like,
Okay, I guess you can kill me now.
and then James is like,
well, don't you want your boyfriend to avenge you?
and then Bella's like,
Well, no, not really.
and then he's like,
Well, I wasn't really expecting that, but since I'm the half-assed antagonist of the story, I guess I'll just start doing bad things to you now.
the Cullens swoop in to save Bella, and they kill the tracker in like 2 seconds, but only after she already has a broken leg, a concussion, and the vampire bite.
Good job.
I'm feeling hungry again, but I know that's
Oh, you're
impossible.
hungry again?
I'm not. I
Just
just
had a
feel
whole
hungry
croissant.
again. And now Carlisle is trying to stop the bleeding, and Edward sucks out the venom from her blood. She wakes up in the hospital, and Edward tells her their whole made-up story so she doesn't have to explain to her parents that she was almost killed by a vampire. She ends up recovering, they go back home to Forks, and then they go to prom, and she really wants Edward to turn her into a vampire, and he's basically like, no, and then that's the end of Twilight. Here's a quick introduction of some of the Cullens. First, there's Edward. He's a moody, mind-reading vampire virgin who finds Bella's blood particularly appealing. Then there's Rosalie. She's really feeling herself, like she doesn't think you're even on her level. She is that. And Edward just thinks that she's really full of herself. Then there's Emmett. He's definitely a jock-type villager. He's super strong, he's super honest, and he's like the big bear vampire brother to Edward. Then there's Jasper. He's an empath times 1000. He's able to feel and control the emotions of others, but his vegetarian vampire skills are pretty weak. However, I personally believe that he's the most underrated Cullen. Lastly, there's Alice. She is the most stylish Cullen. She can see possible futures. She's like almost a fairy basically, And I think she deserved Bella more than Edward does. So in Midnight Sun, we don't just get a look into Edward's perspective, but anyone he comes into contact with, since he can read their minds. At the start of the book, Edward feels like he's in purgatory and his life is just on repeat, and then one day Bella comes in, she's the new girl and everyone's thinking about her, but he's basically like,
ugh, like, what's so special about her anyways? She's just some normal girl.
And then he realizes that he can't read her mind. He's concerned, but he's pretty whatever about it. From the very beginning, he feels like he wants to protect her from the people around her because they're all like disingenuous and they have like secret motives with her. But he's like, I don't even know this girl, so let me not be too worried about her. Then it's time for bio. Edward gets one whiff of Bella's scent and he's like,
I'm literally ready to risk it all to like eat this girl up. Like, how many kids next do I have to snap so I could get her alone in the room?
but then he overcomes it because he realizes how like shameful it would be to go home and his family has to move because of him. So he runs away to Alaska and he talks with Tanya and she tells him like he needs to stand up for himself and go back home. He comes back and he's even more intrigued by Bella. He's watching her through other people's minds and he tries talking to her, but he feels like it's a guessing game since he doesn't know what she's thinking. He doesn't understand her, but he knows that he's a risk to her and his whole family's identity, so he talks to Carlisle about their options, and reluctantly he decides that he'll leave, but only after he sees her one more time. But then the accident happens. Charlie pulls up in the school parking lot to check on Bella, and Edward realizes that he can't fully hear his mind. He can understand the tone of his thoughts, but he can't completely understand the words. After Bella is discharged from the hospital and she's asking him all these questions, he decides that the best thing to do is to gaslight her and be like, oh, like, no one's gonna believe you, so that he can protect his family's identity so they can stay in Forks. After everything that's happened, Edward is like, okay, this is time for me to leave. But his family decides that's not the best idea because they need him so they can hear the thoughts of others and make sure that no one's being too suspicious of the Cullens. Something we didn't see in Twilight was that there's a whole ass family debate as to whether or not they should kill Bella. Jasper and Rosalie are all for it, but the rest of them are like, no, I don't think we should do that. From the very start, Rosalie was the most upset about this whole Bella situation, because back in the day, when it was just Rosalie and Edward and Carlisle and Esme, Edward didn't find her beauty overwhelmingly attractive, and he didn't like grovel at her feet, which is what she was used to. But then years later, Edward hasn't been into anyone, and all of a sudden he's into Bella. She's just this like plain ass bagel, and she doesn't even compare, so Rosalie is just secretly jealous. After this, Alice tells them that she's seen a vision where her and Bella are like homie G's, so she has decided she already loves Bella. This gets Jasper to stand down, and in turn, Rosalie stands down as well. Later, Alice tells them that Bella's only futures are to become a vampire or to be killed by Edward. Edward decides that because of Alice's vision, he's just going to completely ignore Bella. But he does the complete opposite. He talks to her more, he's more intrigued by like her selflessness and her bravery. He starts getting jealous of other boys. He starts stalking her because maybe a meteor is gonna hit her house or something. He feels like he has to protect her, even though it's really for his own benefit, like for his own curiosity. He's watching her while she's sleeping, and he hears her say his name in her sleep, and this makes him fall in love with Bella. He said that she is like a rising sun in his eternal vampire midnight, hence Midnight Sun. After he realizes his feelings for her, Edward is the king of mixed signals. He's wanting to spend more one-on-one time with her while also warning her to stay away from him, like, if you know what's best for you. And he's really in his feelings about Bella. He's having a really intense internal conflict, with the side of him that wants to love her and care for her, and the side of him that wants to be a bloodthirsty vampire. In this chapter, the only new information that we learn is how the Cullens coupled up. Basically, Edward is thinking about them and comparing them to himself because he feels like his situation is so awkward that he can't relate to any of their stories. Rosalie and Emmett became a couple basically right after Emmett was turned into a vampire. She had found him after he was mauled by a bear, and she felt like she just had to save him. So even though it was really out of her way and really hard to bring him all the way to Carlisle, Carlisle was able to turn Emmett, and happily ever after. Emmett basically just treats her like a queen, and they have a really simple story. Alice and Jasper became a couple because Alice in her visions, like 28 years before, she could see that one day she would be with Jasper. Jasper, he had just finished his whole ordeal with the newborn armies and Maria, and he was really sad and depressed, but then one day they meet. She tells him all about the Cullens and how they'll be a part of a happy family one day. Lastly, Carlisle and Esme became a couple after she got turned into a vampire. She had known him while she was growing up, and she admired his gentleness and kindness because she had a really rough life. One day she decided to kill herself because her son died right after he was born. So they brought her to the morgue, and Carlisle could still hear her heart beating. He turned her out of his own loneliness because he had only had Edward at that point. But to his surprise, she had a lot of romantic love for him, and he returned the feeling. So they got together. This whole chapter is just Edward being a stalker, an obsessed stalker, an obsessed vampire stalker. Because he's stalking her everywhere, he follows her to Port Angeles when she goes with her friends, and then he realizes that she's missing. He's starting to get all frantic and panicking, and he's looking for her, and right before she gets attacked, he finds her and is able to save her. He wants to stay with her, and he wants her to trust him. So they go to dinner, and he tells her why he was in Port Angeles and why he was following her, and he tells her that he can read everyone's mind except for hers. Now we'll do a short segue into Greek mythology. Edward compares Bella to Persephone and the pomegranate, implying that he's Hades. The story goes that one day, Hades went up to the surface, he saw Persephone and instantly fell in love. So he kidnapped her and brought her down to the underworld. Persephone's family comes for her and demands that he lets her go, and he's like, sure, whatever. But in reality, he cursed her with a pomegranate seed, so now she wants to come back. So she spends half the year with her family and the other half with Hades. So that's Persephone and the pomegranate, and that's the metaphor that Edward uses to describe his relationship with Bella, which seems pretty non-toxic, right? After dinner, he basically tells Bella that he's a vampire, and then he goes home and he gets Carlisle to help him with Lanny. Lanny was the main who was going to attack Bella, and then he finds out that Carlisle was able to get Lanny thrown in jail. In these next two chapters, Edward is basically just spying on Bella and listening in on her conversations and getting upset about what he hears. And then Bella's like, oh, like, maybe you shouldn't be listening to my conversations then. And then the book doesn't address it further than that. One part we didn't see in Twilight was the need for Edward to thank Angela, because he always uses her mind the most to look through people's heads while he's spying on Bella. Basically, he finds out that Angela likes this boy named Ben, and so Edward gets Emmett to help him, and they have this fake conversation about how Edward is interested in Angela, and Ben is like, what? Edward is too dangerous for her. And he later ends up asking Angela out, so the plan works, and it's just a really sweet moment. In the next couple of days, Edward is basically interrogating Bella, asking her all these questions about herself, about her family, and we get to find out more stuff about Bella, which I thought was pretty cool. Like, we've been following her through these 4 books, and we don't really know that stuff about her. Like, all we know about her personality is that, like, she's, like, not like other girls. We learn a bunch of stuff about her, like, she likes Sour Patch Kids and Star Wars and Beauty and the Beast, and, like, she wants to travel to England and stuff like that. It's not, like, super important to know this information, but I like that I found this out because it's, like, that just kind of adds to the character. After he's asking her all these questions, he goes home and he's all mopey, and then Esme comes in, and this is really, like, we see her, like, twice in the book, and it's just, like, not literally, but she doesn't have a lot of time, and it's like you'd think they would give her more time in this book. She basically is just encouraging Edward and letting him know that everything's gonna be all right and that he deserves love, and it's just really sweet, and it just sucks because we don't get to see her that much. At the beginning of this chapter, Alice tells Edward that she sees him killing Bella at the meadow. He's desperately trying to prevent these futures, but she tells him that all of Bella's, like, possible futures are, like, tangled up in a knot, and that he has to just go through with the meadow. Essentially, this is just a test for Edward, and he has to pass it to see where his relationship can go with Bella. But on the bright side, there is a future where Bella is 2 to 3 years older, she's still human, she's still with Edward, and they're all happy together. But Alice tells him that this can only happen through his own will. It doesn't take Bella's feelings into consideration. Right before they go into the meadow, Edward is all stressed out, like, will Bella reject him? Like, will she find him a repulsive monster? But as we all know, she accepts him, and he's really happy about it. He decides to stop splitting himself into these 2 versions, and he's like, okay, I have to deal with it. So after the meadow and after Bella has fallen asleep that night, Edward goes home to ask Rosalie if she's okay with meeting Bella. But here is a pretty, like, kind of a sad part. We find out that Rosalie just really can't bear to watch, like, this whole scene. She really, like, would do anything to have her humanity again. She's feeling like Bella is just, like, throwing it away, like her and Edward are just careless, and it just hurts her too much to see it. She wants to be there for Edward as a sister, but it's just really hard for her. The next day, Bella goes to Edward's house and she meets all of his family except for Rosalie and Emmett, and we find out a lot of information about Carlisle. Like, this whole chapter is just about Carlisle. So Carlisle is very compassionate to everyone he meets, whether it's human, vampire, werewolf, like, it doesn't matter. He's super woke, like, very, like, sweet and giving and trusting, and he's probably, like, the best doctor in the whole world. His vampire ability is that he is not, like, put in a frenzy when he's around blood. If you couldn't tell, I really stan Carlisle. So Carlisle was a human in London around the 1600s. His dad was, like, this crazy preacher who would hunt down people and kill them, thinking they were vampires or monsters, but they were actually just innocent people. Carlisle later took on the family business, but he was more logical about it. However, he ended up getting bit by a vampire, and it was a really painful experience for him, obviously. Carlisle knew what he was becoming, so he hid himself away from people, and he really did not want to kill someone, so he just put himself in solitude. But after so long, he started going crazy out of thirst. Like, without thinking about it, he ended up, like, eating an animal, like drinking the animal's blood, and he found out that was a good way for him to survive. Like, it worked for him. So now that he had a way to control his thirst, he started studying in science and art and, like, just being very, like, intellectual. Hundreds of years passed, and Carlisle was starting to feel pretty lonely because he's a vegetarian vampire, so he can't relate to people, he can't relate to the other vampires. So one by one, he starts converting his family over time, just out of loneliness and to save them. Alice and Jasper already knew about Carlisle and his family, but when the day came that they actually met, like, the Cullens were super freaked out because Jasper was the spookiest vampire they had ever seen, like covered in scars and looking like he had fought a bunch of vampires. But Alice showed her visions to Edward because she knew that he could read her mind, and he could see that all of them would be happy together, and so once his guard was down, the rest of the family welcomed them in. The rest of what happens, we already know because it's like the baseball game up until Laurent, James, and Victoria intrude on the baseball game. This is where Jasper pulls out the big guns. With his empathy ability, he's able to make the three vampires focus more on Edward's intensity and how big Emmett is and how charming Carlisle is and how beautiful Rosalie is, while at the same time concealing himself, Alice, Bella, and Esme. So in Twilight, we're following Bella, and we don't know what's going on with Edward, Carlisle, and Emmett because they're just somewhere else. But in Midnight Sun, this next sequence is actually really suspenseful and action-packed. Edward, Carlisle, and Emmett are now leading the tracker up north. They tricked him into thinking that they have Bella with them, but their plan is to turn around and ambush him. However, it seems like the tracker knew what they were doing all along because he leads them on this crazy cat and mouse chase. He's obviously toying with them until he decides to evade with an airplane and not through the water like they thought he would. Then the three Cullens get to Arizona, and Edward realizes that Bella evaded Jasper and Alice, and Edward is... He almost blows their cover by going a little bit too fast through the airport, and they're looking pretty suspicious. They get down to the parking lot, and he decides, I'm gonna steal this WRX Subaru race car. They're going a little too fast and furious on the freeway. Edward is being all sad and moody about Bella, and Jasper uses his empathy ability to turn them all into a super hyper-functional machine, and they run a lady off the road and steal her car and throw their old car into traffic, and they're just doing the most to get to Bella on time. They finally get to the ballet studio, but only after Bella has been totally wrecked. And they're just trying to help her and assess her injuries, and then they find out that she was bitten. They're taking the time to figure out what to do with her. Alice is you know what, we should just let her turn, and Edward is He contemplates even just killing her right there because he doesn't think that he can save her. But then Carlisle is you know what, Edward, give her the suck and suck the venom out, and maybe she'll be okay. After they leave the ballet studio, it's Alice's mission to make the perfect cover story. So she uses her visions to help her, and she thinks about what she's gonna do. She sees it in the vision, and then anytime something goes wrong, she goes back and fixes it. So that was pretty cool. After Bella wakes up and they talk about what happened, what's her story, he tells her that she should go to Florida with her mom so she's not with the despicable monster. And the thought of him leaving her gives her so much anxiety. So he tells her okay, Bella, I'll be with you forever, I promise. But in his own head, he's
not until you're whole, not until I have the strength.
They leave the hospital and go back to Forks. He tricks her into going into prom because he's thinking one day she's gonna have some babies, and it's gonna suck if she can't tell them that she didn't go to prom. So he tricks her into going prom, and she's oh, Edward, I want to be a vampire too. And he's no. And then that's the end of Twilight. So we both read the book, and now it is book club time. So we're just gonna talk about it and share our feelings, basically.
To be honest, I wouldn't have read this book on my own, but I did, so here I am. And to be honest, now that I'm looking back at my opinions, I feel my opinions are like what a basic dude would like about Twilight. But anyways, here we go. I liked how Jasper is just this total badass vampire warrior. He's like a veteran. He's killed so many other vampires, and he can control the emotions of everyone around him, and like he can turn everyone into like a single war machine. I was like, wow, awesome. But yeah, another thing that kind of disappointed me was like the final fight with like Emmett and Jasper versus like the Tracker. I was like, dang, this is like gonna be Clash of the Titans, but like they kill him in like 2 seconds, and like he was being teased as like, oh, I've never seen a man as bad as James before in all my 300 years of life. That's what Laurent said about James, and I was thinking like, oh, he's like a baddie, he's probably gonna like bite somebody's head off, but like no, they killed him so quickly, and I was like, okay, I guess the climax is more about like Edward and Bella, I guess. So yeah, I like how like they had to like try to lead him north and then try to ambush him. I feel like they should just try to straight fight him.
They should have. What was the point of all that?
Same, yeah. Another thing is like Edward's character development arc didn't really make sense to me, because like we all know that after the meadow, he's like, oh, I am the good and the bad vampire, and I have to live with it, you know? And I'm like, nice, good job, Edward. You're like more woke about yourself now, and you're ready to mature. But then at the end, he's like, I'll stay with you, Bella, until you're strong enough. And then I'm just like, dang, it's like he didn't even make that character development. Or it's almost as if like Stephanie Meyer was like, damn, I need to write more books, and we just fuck him up at the end or something. Like, I don't know.
That's probably literally exactly why that happened.
Yeah.
Because it's like Bella doesn't really have a character development throughout the whole series.
Mm-hmm.
Everything just comes to her, like things happen to her, and she's able to get out of it, but it's not like it doesn't help her even through the rest of the series. So it's like, you think at least for Edward, as we go through the series, he does have character development, but it could have been really like emphasized with how she wrote Midnight Sun.
Yeah, another thing I liked was all like the vampire lore. I think like no matter what the thing is, whether it's like a book or a video game, if there's like mythological ancient stuff in it, I'm like, cool, I like it. Magical vampires, they have like powers based off of their personality. Cool, I like it. My last and most important personal opinion, based off of like hours of research, I have finally found the answer to the debate of Team Edward versus Team Jacob. It is neither. It is Team Alice. Like, she knew that she loved Bella before Edward had even like decided what to do about his situation. She honestly deserves Bella more than him. She's like always looking out for her and everything. And honestly, I feel like if it was Alice making the choices, she would have just like turned Bella into a vampire right at the beginning, and like everything would be just simple.
Yeah, like no Volturi,
Yeah.
no werewolves, no
Yeah.
problems, just shorter series,
Yeah.
but more satisfying.
Yeah.
So something that I really liked about the story was that we had more backstory about like everything. Like, we learned that Edward and Alice like team up a lot to figure out a bunch of situations. Like, we find out about Charlie and how Edward can't really read his mind. And then the things like with like Bella, that we learn her personality, because it's like before, it's like you don't even know stuff about Bella because it's her story. So I thought that was pretty cool. Another thing that I liked was like the book cover. I feel like it just fits. Like, it looks like an anatomical heart, and it like it's like really bloody and juicy and like kind of gross, and it's like metaphorical and symbolic, and I just think it's really fitting. Like, I think the book cover, in context to the story, is a really good book cover.
Yeah.
One part that I thought was like super sweet was how Edward wanted to thank Angela. Like, you really have to read that whole scene where it's Edward and Emmett trying to convince Ben. It's just super sweet and it's really funny. And it's like one of my favorite parts of the book, so. We usually listen to audiobooks, so I'm listening to the book at work about the part where like Bella is yelling at Charlie, and I'm like at my computer just like tears coming down because it's so sad. Like throughout the whole book, Edward mentions like, oh, like I don't know what he's thinking, but I can feel that Charlie really loves Bella. And it's at a part where they're like sitting down and eating, and like they're both just being quiet at the table, but it's like I would have never thought that. And it's just so like Charlie deserves better.
Same. I feel like Charlie is the best dad.
Another good dad is Carlisle, and I really have come to appreciate Carlisle's character. Like, we don't really get that much of a chance in the other books. Like the part where Rosalie was being annoying when they're all like at the Cullens' house and Laurent is there and they're getting ready to leave because of James. Like, Carlisle could have been like, Rosalie, what the is your problem? Like, he could have been like mad and rude, but he trusts her. He's still like, clearly he's stressed, but he still is able to keep his cool. Like, he's still able to be like calm and helpful and nice. And so I really like Carlisle. Probably my biggest problem with the book was Edward. Like, throughout the whole book, he is just like sneaky and like lying and moody and just like annoying, and he just goes on and on and on about like the same things, and I wasn't a fan of Edward's perspective. If it had been anyone else's perspective, well, maybe not Rosalie, but like anyone else, I would have liked it, but Edward is just like too moody for me.
Same.
Like, I can't.
I see this book as one half love story and one half vampire thriller, and I was only satisfied by the thriller half, so I give this book 5 out of 10 brownies. Honestly, I would read a book if it was about like the Cullens fighting crime or something, like some Sherlock Holmes stuff, or it's like the Cullens are hunting Nazis during World War II or something, like stopping 9/11. Like, I don't know if it's because like I'm like a guy and I'm just like, love story, I just want to see vampires fight, but I don't know, like I really tried to like read the book. I read the whole series. I just feel like in terms of like a love story, it's just like I can't even give it any brownies, you know? But on the bright side, like, the Twilight universe is, like, it's very, like, creative. I feel like there's a lot of potential for, like, storytelling, you know, and drama.
I would give Midnight Sun 6 out of 10 brownies. Basically, I really loved all of the backstory, like, the insight, like, learning about the vampires, like what they're doing in their current situations and what they did in the past, and all of that I very much enjoyed. I just don't really like realizing all of the parts that are bad about Edward and Bella's relationship. Like, this is a love story and it just doesn't make any sense. I just wish that like all the times where Edward was moody and annoying, I wish it was like just like a full book of backstories, like an anthology about the Cullens and how they came to be and all of their little stories and everything. So yeah.
Again, we're asking you to match what you paid for Midnight Sun in donation to the Quileute tribe. Link is in the description below. Go donate to the Quileute tribe. This is our very first video, but we might cover more Twilight books in the future, and if those videos ever get monetized, we're gonna donate half of those earnings to the Quileute tribe, and we're gonna post the receipts in our YouTube community section or whatever it's called, because we'd like to be transparent with you guys, so you can check that out if you want.
Thanks for watching our video. We really appreciate it. If you want to see more videos from us, please click the like and subscribe. Go ahead and follow us on our IG. We got a nice little like bookstagram thing going on. Follow us on our Twitter. We're just talking about books while we're high, so Anyways, thanks again for watching. Bye.
Bye.